The rain came the night the sky forgot to blink. No stars. No moon. Just clouds, thick endless clouds that rolled across the heavens like the slow drag of something ancient waking up. It started with a whisper. A drizzle soft as breath. People stepped out onto balconies and rooftops with upturned faces, letting the drops kiss their skin. It had been months. Dry heat had cracked the land. Wildfires had turned green hills into ash. The world had begged for rain, and it had answered. But not like this. At first it felt like a gift. Cool, pure, and silent. The kind of rain that made people cry not from sadness but from something deeper. Relief. Hope. The scent of wet earth lifted like incense. Children danced in the streets. Old men stood still, closing their eyes. For one night, it seemed like earth had been forgiven. Then people started getting sick. Not violently. Not immediately. It was subtle, like the rain had pulled something loose inside them. A woman in New Delhi coughed up a thin thread of metal. A boy in Arizona began speaking in a tongue no one recognized, and never stopped. A man in Sweden looked in the mirror and saw someone else staring back. And always the eyes. Brightening. Sharpening. Glowing. Governments called it a weather anomaly. Climate compensation. Something to do with the magnetic field or solar winds. Scientists took samples, ran simulations, and choked on contradictions. They couldn't explain how the rain left behind a residue that shimmered like oil but hummed like a living thing. Nor could they understand how that residue crept into everything: soil, water, skin, and thoughts. It wasn't long before someone whispered the word no one wanted to say out loud: invasion. But there were no ships, no lasers, no grand broadcast from the stars. Just rain. The second downpour came 9 days later. This time the world was ready. Or thought it was. Shelters were built, evacuation orders issued, military units stood at attention. But the rain didn't care. It fell anyway, through roofs, through steel, through every known barrier man had made. It soaked the earth and the bones of every creature above it. Some people dissolved into silence. Others became different. And then came the disappearances. Whole towns vanished between one breath and the next. Empty clothes, warm meals still on stoves, candles flickering with no one to watch them. No sound. No struggle. Just absence. It was as if the rain had come to collect something. Or someone. And nobody knew who'd be next. That's where she came in. She had no memory of the first storm. Only flashes, a field of sunflowers, the warmth of a hand in hers, a voice calling her name that no longer had meaning. When she woke, her body was drenched but not wet. Her skin had changed. Pale, yes, but pulsing faintly like it remembered the lightning. They found her wandering the outskirts of a crater that didn't exist on any map. No identification. No known origin. Just her and the scorched earth where nothing grew anymore. The doctors kept her quarantined for weeks. She never spoke. But she watched. Always watched. Like she was waiting for something to catch up. They named her after the place she was found, but she never answered to it. What none of them knew, what no one could guess, was that she was the first. Not infected. Not possessed. Not broken. Changed. And behind her eyes, something had begun to stir. Meanwhile, in underground bunkers across the globe, a different kind of silence was growing. Not the stillness of fear, but the hush of preparation. Engineers, biologists, linguists, and soldiers, all working under flickering fluorescent lights trying to make sense of what was happening. Trying to fight it. They thought they could decode the rain. Break it down. Find a cure or a weapon or a wall to hide behind. But the rain wasn't the enemy. The rain was the test. Only one group truly understood what was coming. A fractured network of analysts and ex-soldiers, long disbanded after the last World War, had been tracking anomalies for decades, unexplained signals, shifts in atmosphere, voices buried in static. They called it the Weeping Protocol. According to their data, every extinction-level event in Earth's history had begun with a change in water. This wasn't new. Just forgotten. The planet, they said, had always been a battlefield. The enemy just wore different masks. But this time the mask was the sky. And Earth had been marked. When the third rain came, it didn't fall everywhere. Just in select places. Deserts. Forests, mountains. Hidden valleys where no satellite had a name. And from those places they began to rise. Not aliens. Not machines. Humans. But no longer quite human. Their bodies moved like liquid. Their eyes glowed with the same shimmer as the rain. They didn't speak, but they acted in unison as if hearing the same song. And where they walked, electronics failed. Engines coughed and died. Radios screamed static. They never attacked. They just stood and watched. The world started to split. Some believed these beings were Earth's answer to invasion. A counterforce. A defense system built from within, born of the rain. Others called them abominations. Test subjects gone wrong. Weapons in disguise. They were labeled, hunted, studied, feared. But none of that mattered. Because the real war hadn't started yet. In a small, coastal village, far from the noise of the collapsing world, an old man sat on his porch, staring at the sky. His hands trembled, not from age but from knowing. He'd seen this before. Not in his lifetime but in dreams passed down like blood. He'd told his granddaughter stories of silver storms and people who glowed, thinking they were just stories. Until the day she came back from the forest after the rain, barefoot and changed. He didn't ask where she went. Or why the grass refused to grow where she walked. He just looked into her eyes, and remembered the sea before it boiled, the sky before it wept. "Are you afraid of me now?" she asked, her voice soft. He shook his head. "No. I'm afraid of what you'll have to become." That night he packed a small bag, kissed her forehead, and whispered a name she didn't recognize. The next morning he was gone. All that remained was a note. "When the sky cries again, follow the silence. It will lead you to the truth. ****. She held it in her hand as thunder rumbled in the distance. Elsewhere, in the ruins of what used to be a city, a group of survivors listened to a strange transmission. It wasn't in any known language but it vibrated in their bones. One of them, an ex-teacher who'd once specialized in old dialects, claimed it wasn't a message at all. "It's instructions," she said wide-eyed. "For building something." "What?" they asked. She didn't answer. She just smiled. And started to draw. The lines she etched into the concrete weren't human. They pulsed. Glowed faintly. Like veins under skin. And the moment she finished the final symbol, the ground beneath them groaned. The others backed away. Something was waking up. Something old. Back in the compound where the girl with no name was kept, alarms blared. Red lights spun. The sensors had picked up a reading off the charts. Origin unknown, source unknown, but matching the frequency of the rain. She stood up in her cell, eyes calm. For the first time she spoke. "They're coming." "Who?" the guard asked, fingers trembling on his weapon. She tilted her head. "The ones who think they can stop it." "Stop what?" She looked past him, past the walls, to something only she could see. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "The forging." He didn't understand. Not yet. But soon they all would. Because the rain hadn't come to destroy. It had come to shape. To remake. And the girl, she was only the beginning. A weapon forged not in fire, but in grief, hope, and storm. A weapon that still didn't know what it was meant to fight. But it would. And as thunder cracked the sky one final time, a new storm began to rise. Not from above. From within. The storm rolled in heavier this time. The clouds weren't just dark, they were wrong. They moved like something alive, twisting in place without wind, folding into themselves like they were watching. The lightning came silent. No crack. No boom. Just white veins splitting the sky, and each bolt didn't vanish. It lingered, humming softly as if waiting to be remembered. The girl stood at the compound's edge now, behind reinforced glass, watching the rain begin to fall. She didn't blink. Didn't move. The guards had stopped talking around her days ago. Something about her presence made their words quieter, their movements slower. Like time frayed around her. The compound director, an older woman named Kara, watched from the control room. She had been there since the first cases. Back then she believed everything had a pattern. Cause effect. Disease treatment. But this wasn't medical. Or physical. It was something that moved deeper. She looked down at the readouts in front of her. Heart rate, brainwaves, neural activity, none of them made sense. The girl's brain should have burned out with that much activity. But she didn't even flinch. "She hasn't eaten in days," one of the assistants whispered. "She doesn't need to," Kara replied. "She's running on something else now." Outside the storm touched the trees. And for a moment, just a breath, the entire forest bent toward the girl. Far away beyond mountains and what was left of broken cities, there was a place that hadn't seen humans in over 50 years. An abandoned research site. Remote, hidden, forgotten by most governments after funding dried up. The facility had been built into the rock itself. Concrete walls buried in stone, once a place of quiet data collection. Weather studies, tectonic sensors, atmospheric monitoring. Now it thrummed with light again. A technician named Tomas had arrived there alone. He wasn't military, just someone who used to track storms and had seen the same pattern form 3 times now. Every time the rain came, a ring of pressure built first. A ring no natural storm could create. It pulsed like a heartbeat. He followed it. Spent weeks comparing data. And it always led back to the same set of coordinates, the buried lab. The place wasn't supposed to exist anymore. But when he broke the rusted seal and walked in, the light still worked. Power still flowed. And in the lowest chamber, a screen flickered back to life. A signal. Pulsing. The same rhythm he'd heard in the static. Except this time it was clearer. A voice, mechanical and human all at once, repeating the same phrase over and over. Asterisk, the rain is not the enemy. The enemy is already inside. Asterisk. He didn't understand. Not yet. Back in the compound, the girl finally moved. Just one step forward. Just enough for the floor sensors to notice. Kara stood and leaned into the mic. Do you know what's coming? The girl turned her head slightly. It's already here, she said. Where? She closed her eyes. Inside the ones who drank the rain. That stopped Kara cold. You mean infection? The girl shook her head. No. It's not in their blood. It's in their memory. Kara stared. That's not possible. The girl opened her eyes. Not for you. But we remember things differently now. And she smiled. It wasn't cruel. Or kind. It was a smile full of knowing. Somewhere across the ocean, in a military satellite station that had gone dark during the second storm, a small team had returned to salvage what they could. Communications were down. Drones stopped working. But something had kept recording. A single camera buried beneath shielding had captured a flash of light during the storm's peak, one frame that wasn't just weather. It showed a figure standing in the middle of a blast zone. No armor. No weapons. Just standing, arms out as if absorbing the storm itself. When they enhanced the image, it wasn't a blur. It was clear. A man. Human in shape. But his skin looked like fractured glass, filled with light. And his eyes. One technician fainted when she saw them. They weren't glowing. They were reflecting everything. Not like mirrors, more like memories. A week later, the technician who'd passed out left a note behind before disappearing. Asterisk. The storm doesn't burn us. It shows us. That's why they want to stop it. Because when we remember who we were before fear, we become something they can't control. Asterisk. It was the last thing she ever wrote. In a refugee camp built along the border of what used to be known as Central Europe, people whispered stories. About the ones who walked through fire without getting burned. About those who vanished during the rain but returned days later, calmer, colder, unshakable. A little boy came back with silver lines under his skin like roots. His voice deeper than it should have been. He told the doctors he saw something in the storm. A city made of sound. Towers of vibration. People made of wind. He said they were watching us from the rain, waiting for something to wake up. They're not hurting us, he said. They're reminding us what we forgot. His mother cried. Held him close. But even she couldn't deny, he didn't blink the same way anymore. The conflict wasn't loud. It wasn't the kind you could film or measure in damage. It was happening inside people, quiet wars behind the eyes. Families were splitting. Some embraced the storm, claiming it was Earth evolving. Others locked themselves in underground shelters, terrified of what would come next. Cities grew quieter. Not safer. Just uncertain. And beneath it all, a question no one could answer. What was the rain building us into? Back at the compound, the girl's pulse quickened. Kara stood over the monitors, watching as all sensors lit up, one after another. The air was shifting. Pressure dropping. Electromagnetic fields dancing like ghosts. Kara reached for the intercom. What's happening to her? A voice came back. She's humming. Indeed, the girl stood perfectly still, eyes closed, lips shut. But a low hum filled the room. Not mechanical. Not human. Something else. Something that made the glass tremble. She's calling to something, said one of the techs. No, Kara whispered. Something's answering. The girl opened her eyes. They were glowing now. But not in a terrifying way. They glowed like memory, like sunrise. And then, as if following a silent cue, she turned and placed her hand on the reinforced wall. It melted. No heat. No spark. Just folded like silk. She stepped out into the hallway. The guards raised weapons but froze. Not from fear, something deeper. They couldn't move. Couldn't blink. As if part of them recognized her. As if something in their bones wanted to follow. She walked past them without a word. And the further she walked, the more lights turned on, not electrically but organically. like the building itself was waking up to her presence. Kara ran to intercept her. "Stop. Please. Just tell me what you are." The girl paused. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I think the storm does." Behind them, alarms started to fail. Screens flickered. Communications dropped to static. Kara reached out. "I don't want to lose more people." "You won't," the girl replied. "You'll just stop recognizing them." And she kept walking. Miles away, Tomas in the buried research site found something beneath the lab. A vault. Unmarked. Untouched. It required no password. No key. It opened the moment he stood in front of it. Inside was a map. But it wasn't made of paper. Moved. Shifted. Pulsed like a heartbeat. And it showed every place the rain had fallen. Every storm. Every pulse. Connected by light. At the center was a word. A single name. Hollow Star. He didn't know what it meant. But the moment he spoke it out loud, the chamber trembled, and every storm sensor on the planet lit up. Back in the compound, the girl stopped walking. She felt it too. Someone else had spoken the name. Someone else was waking up. She looked toward the sky. And smiled again. This time it wasn't calm. It was ready. In a quiet place, far from all the chaos, a child sat beside a river, watching the water ripple in perfect patterns. Her father sat nearby, carving a piece of wood. They hadn't seen the rain yet. But she dreamed of it. Every night. She told him stories of lights and voices, of people who turned into music and trees that remembered how to move. He didn't believe her. Not really. But he listened. Because deep down, something in her voice felt old. When she looked up at him that night, her eyes were glowing softly. "You're going to change soon," she whispered. He laughed nervously. "Me?" She nodded. "The rain is coming here next. But it's not to hurt you. It wants you to remember." "Remember what?" She smiled. "That we used to be more than afraid." He didn't sleep that night. And when the first drop hit his hand, it wasn't cold. It was familiar. All across the world, something ancient was crawling back to the surface. Not a monster. Not a god. A memory. A design written into the bones of humanity long ago, buried beneath fear, war, greed. Something the rain was awakening again. But not everyone welcomed it. Some tried to weaponize it. Some tried to erase it. And some were simply waiting for the weapon to choose who it would become. The girl walked through the gates now into the storm. And the storm welcomed her home. The rain didn't stop this time. It fell in silence, endless and slow, as if time had thickened. There was no wind, no sound, just the constant patter on rooftops, leaves, skin. It covered cities and forests and deserts alike, and everywhere it touched, something shifted. Concrete softened. Grass turned silver. Static buzzed at the edge of every transmission. And those who had been changed by the earlier storms felt it in their bones. Something was coming closer. The girl walked barefoot through the open field, the ground beneath her pulsing faintly like it had a heartbeat of its own. Lights shimmered beneath the soil, spreading out in soft waves wherever she stepped. Behind her, the compound had gone completely dark. Power grid dead. Communications silent. The storm wasn't just over them, it was inside the earth now, inside every wire, every circuit, every thought. Kara followed her at a distance. Her coat soaked through, her hands trembling. She didn't know why she was still following the girl, only that she couldn't stop. It was more than curiosity now. It was something deeper. Something pulling. "Where are you going?" Kara asked, breath catching. The girl didn't turn. "To the beginning." What beginning? But there was no answer. Only the hum in the air growing louder. Miles away, Tomas clutched the glowing map beneath the research facility. The word Hollow Star was still pulsing at the center, each beat sending out a wave of pressure that rattled the metal walls. Sweat dripped down his face. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Hadn't dared. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, memories that didn't belong to him. Cities that had never existed. Faces he'd never seen whispering in a language he now understood. They weren't visions. They were instructions. He pulled open the final panel at the base of the vault, where the hum was strongest. Inside was something wrapped in dark cloth, smooth, heavy. He unwrapped it slowly, revealing a device unlike anything he'd seen before. Not built. Not assembled. It looked grown. The surface shimmered with that same rainbow oil glow as the rain. He reached out and touched it. In a single moment, every storm across the planet intensified. Thunder cracked without sound. Light spiraled across the sky in unnatural arcs. In cities where rain hadn't fallen yet, people screamed and pointed upward. The clouds were forming symbols. Not letters. Not signs. Memories. Every raindrop was showing people something different, something deeply personal. A mother saw the day she lost her child, only this time the moment didn't end. It looped, paused, unfolded into new meaning. A soldier dropped his weapon in the middle of the road, tears running down his face, as he heard the voices of those he thought he'd buried long ago. And in the middle of a ruined square, a young man fell to his knees, whispering a name he didn't know he remembered. The rain wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. And humanity was starting to see itself clearly. But not everyone could handle the truth it brought. In high-security bunkers across different nations, orders were being given. Quietly. Coldly. Firewalls were activated. Drones launched. Contingency plans no one had believed would ever be used were now in motion. The rain was being declared a global threat. The stormwalkers, the changed, the humans with anomalies, were now labeled unstable. Dangerous. Someone had to take control of the situation. Someone had to stop the memory from spreading. They didn't know what the storm was awakening, but they feared what it would destroy. Power. At one underground launch site, a man sat at a console, hands shaking as he stared at a blinking red command light. His screen displayed a countdown. He didn't even know what it would hit, only that it was targeted at the heart of the anomaly. Somewhere out in that field where the girl now stood. He looked down at the photo in his hand, his daughter. She was one of them now. She had walked into the rain and come back. Different. Not violent. Not strange. Just still. Just certain. She'd said something that hadn't left his mind since. "You're not broken, Dad. You're just afraid of what you could remember." His finger hovered over the button. He couldn't move. The girl stood at the center of the field now. Lightning split the sky behind her in total silence. Around her, others had begun to gather. People like her. Changed. Not in their bodies, but in their presence. Dozens of them. Some young. Some old. All of them calm. All of them silent. They didn't speak to one another, but they seemed to hear the same voice, feel the same pull. Kara stood just outside the circle, her boots sinking into the damp soil. Her chest ached from the pressure in the air. She'd spent her life solving crises. Analyzing threat levels. Responding with force or strategy. But here, nothing fit. "Is this what the storm wanted?" she whispered. The girl finally turned to her. "No. This is what you wanted." The storm only listened. Kara's throat tightened. "We didn't ask for this." "Yes, you did," the girl said softly. "When you begged the sky to save you. When you screamed into silence. When you forgot who you were. The rain didn't come to punish. It came to answer." Behind them, a low rumble built in the sky. The clouds began to rotate, slow at first, then faster. A spiral. A shape that hadn't been seen on Earth since the earliest storms. But this time it wasn't spreading, it was focusing. Concentrating. The spiral hovered directly above the field. And within it, a form began to take shape. Not a ship. Not a monster. A memory. A towering silhouette made of light and water and everything people had forgotten. Kara fell to her knees. Tomas stood inside the research facility, the device in his hands humming louder. The map before him began to collapse inward, all the glowing points converging into a single pulse. Hollow star. His vision blurred. His breath caught in his throat. But he couldn't look away. Every screen, every signal, every camera across the globe that hadn't failed yet flickered with the same image. The field. The girl. The spiral. And the light within it growing. In the bunkers, generals barked orders. Satellites locked targets. Warheads armed. But the girl looked up and closed her eyes. She didn't speak. She simply felt. Every part of her being stretched across the storm, across the memory that wasn't hers but belonged to something older, something buried in every human heart. Fear. Grief. Strength. Kindness. Violence. Forgiveness. Love. Potential. She let it all in. And as the light descended, a scream tore across the atmosphere, not from pain, not from rage, but from release. Every storm that had ever fallen was pouring into that moment. Every choice, every silence, every war, every word. It all pressed into her chest. And still she stood. Kara reached for her, tears streaming down her face. "You're not going to survive this," she whispered. The girl opened her eyes. "I wasn't meant to." The spiral touched the earth, and time seemed to stop. Tomas fell to his knees in the vault, the map vanishing in a final pulse of white light. His ears rang with one last word, etched into his mind. Remember. Across the skies, every storm stilled. Every drop hung frozen in the air. and the silence that followed was deeper than anything Earth had known. But it wasn't over. Not yet. In the heart of that impossible light, where sky met soil and every memory collided, something began to move. The stillness didn't last. It held for maybe a second, maybe less, but in that breathless moment where every raindrop hung frozen midair, something shifted. Not the earth. Not the storm. Something beneath it all. Something older than the rain. The light at the center of the field didn't fade. It deepened, changing from pure white to a dark, pulsing amber. Like an eclipse from the inside out. The glow turned denser, heavier, like it was folding in on itself. And then it cracked. A jagged fracture of lightning split the silence, downward, not from the sky but from the spiral itself. It struck the soil beside the girl and didn't vanish. It held, a pillar of golden static, humming like a scream trapped inside metal. The circle of changed people staggered back, some collapsing to their knees, others gasping as if something had been torn out of them. The girl's body jerked, hands trembling. She turned sharply, eyes wide, staring at the fracture in the air. She hadn't expected this. None of them had. Kara stumbled forward, shielding her eyes from the glow. What is that? What's happening? The girl's voice was thin. It's not just us. What do you mean? They weren't the only ones listening. The hum rose, growing jagged, wrong. The spiral above warped at its edges. What had once been a soft rotation, natural and fluid, was now twisting with force, jerking in unnatural patterns like something was crawling through it. The glow began to shift again, now flickering with deep red streaks threading through the light like veins. Inside the buried facility, Tomas scrambled back from the vault. The device he had touched seconds ago had gone cold, but the walls of the room were pulsing. He could feel a low vibration in his bones, like a tuning fork struck just under his skin. He reached for his comm, still dead, and then the lights went out. Total black. Then a different screen lit up. One he hadn't activated. It was older, dust-covered, running on a system no one used anymore. He wiped the glass. A stream of code ran across it in a language that had only recently started appearing in fragments, glyphs etched into soil by those who'd returned from the rain. He couldn't read them, but he understood the meaning. Not from language. From instinct. Asterisk, the gate was never one way. Asterisk. He staggered back. Gate? He whispered. He'd thought the rain was an answer to humanity's call. A reaction to their grief. A rebalancing. But the data had never said that. It had only shown something arrived. No one had ever confirmed what left. Back in the field, the girl fell to her knees. Her hands clawed at the earth, fingertips burning with heat. Behind her, the others cried out. One of them, a man whose veins glowed like neon under his skin, began to scream. His voice wasn't alone. It echoed, doubled, tripled, until it sounded like a dozen people screaming from inside him. The light fractured again. And then he split. Not torn. Not exploded. He separated. Two bodies where there had been one. One collapsed. The other stood up, eyes black as stone, mouth twitching into a smile that didn't belong. The others backed away. Kara froze. What the hell? The new figure raised its hand. And the air bent. It was subtle. But enough. The sky trembled. Clouds jittered unnaturally. The storm felt thinner. Like it was leaking. The girl looked up, sweat pouring down her face. It's not a memory. Kara turned to her. What's not? That spiral. That's not a message. It's a door. The black-eyed figure took another step forward. Then what's coming through it? Kara asked. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. The things that left us behind. Another figure split from the circle. Then another. Each time the original fell lifeless. The double stood tall, too tall. Wrong proportions. Their joints moved like hinges. Their mouths stayed still even when voices came from them. And their eyes, those black endless eyes, reflected nothing. Not the light. Not the storm. Not the people they had been. One of them spoke. We gave you the chance to become more. The voice didn't shake the ground. It didn't roar. It echoed. From inside. We offered evolution through memory. But memory became resistance. The girl stood unsteady. You're not part of the storm. We are what the storm forgot. And with that, the sky cracked open again. The sound not thunder. More like pressure collapsing inward. The spiral above twisted violently, spinning in reverse. Red lightning spilled downward like liquid fire, carving lines into the ground around the group. A new shape emerged, huge, angular, built of geometric light and ash, a figure that looked more like a construct than a being. Its form constantly shifted, rewriting itself every few seconds, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to become. The girl stared up at it, feeling her heart race in a way it hadn't since before the first storm. These weren't the rain's creations. They were its consequence. Behind her, the group of humans who had walked through the storm were collapsing. Some were weeping. Some were still. Others reached toward her, silently begging for help she didn't know how to give. She looked at Kara. We were the answer. But someone else asked the question first. Tomas watched from his screen as every monitor burst into static, except one. A final line of text appeared. Asterisk, they remember what we were. They came back to stop what we could become. Asterisk. He looked up, and for the first time he felt real fear. Because the rain hadn't made humanity stronger. It had made them visible. And now, something out there wanted them to forget again. But the girl, she hadn't forgotten. Not yet. Not fully. She stepped forward into the light of the twisted spiral, hands raised, not in defense but in challenge. Her voice steady even as her knees trembled. You left us broken. We picked up the pieces. You tried to erase us. We remembered. The black-eyed doubles began to move. Fast. Too fast. Kara yelled. What are they doing? They're not just coming, the girl said. They're trying to override us. One of the twisted figures lunged. She raised her hand. And the moment before impact, the storm exploded into light. Not fire. Not noise. Just light. Pure memory. Everything paused. The next breath would decide everything. But it hadn't arrived yet. The light didn't fade. It grew, swallowing the twisted sky and the spiral above. Everything, the red lightning, the black-eyed figures, the shifting geometric giant, was engulfed in it. The world turned white. Pure. Silent. Weightless. For a moment it felt like the end. Then the sound came back, slow like breath returning to lungs. Kara opened her eyes first, blinking through the glare. Her hands were still trembling. Around her, the others lay scattered across the field, steam rising gently from their clothes. The rain had stopped. The sky was clear. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The girl stood at the center, her arms hanging limp, body shaking. Her skin glowed faintly, not with power but with something softer, like fading heat. Her eyes were closed, lips parted slightly. It looked like she'd won. Like the force that tried to overwrite them had been erased. But Kara saw something else. The girl's shadow, it wasn't matching the sunlight. It flickered, changed shape. It was still being pulled by something. Then came the voice. Not from the air. Not from the sky. From underneath. You gave them memory, it said. The girl flinched. They gave you meaning. It wasn't the voice of the enemy. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't even part of the spiral. It was older, deeper. And it wasn't talking to her. It was talking to humanity. The ground shook. Just a single, sharp tremor. Cracks spidered through the field, glowing with that same amber-red light as before. Something was rising, not from the sky this time but from the earth. It was a shape buried long ago, something made before the storms ever fell. Metal. One. Ancient and terrible. It wasn't alien. It was ours. Tomas watched from his shattered monitor, blood on his forehead from when he'd been thrown back by the pulse. He recognized the shape from satellite records, classified documents that were never meant to surface. They had once called it Project Holostar, a theoretical defense system buried under layers of denial and secrecy. But it was real. A machine designed not to protect humanity, but to control it. He whispered, we did this to ourselves. The spiral in the sky had been a door, yes, but the real danger had never been just from what came through. It had been from what we had prepared for it. The girl looked at Kara with terror in her eyes. That thing, it's responding to us. To all of us. It's not theirs. It's ours. And it thinks we've gone too far. Kara stared stunned. We built something to kill evolution? We built something to stop change, the girl said. The ground cracked again. The Holostar weapon rose, dragging with it twisted metal and forgotten code. Its surface shimmered like rusted steel and memory. It didn't look like a ship. Or a bomb. It looked like a brain made of machines and regret. And it was waking up. A voice boomed, not words but intent. A frequency that hit the spine, not the ears. All around the field, people collapsed again, clutching their heads, gasping, screaming. They weren't dying. They were being scanned. Kara grabbed the girl's arm. Can you stop it? She shook her head. It doesn't hear me. Then who does it hear? The girl looked down at her trembling hands. Then slowly she looked around. The others, Those who had changed in the storm were standing, reaching toward the machine not in fear but in recognition. It wasn't attacking them. It was waiting. And the girl understood. It needs a choice. A choice for what? To decide if we're ready. The machine's glow intensified. It was charging, building something at its core. Not a weapon. Not exactly. A reset. It would erase every change. Every evolution. Every storm-touched soul. Return Earth to before. Before the rain. Before the memory. Before the possibility of something new. The girl stepped forward. And then something shifted again. A hum rose, not from the sky, not from the machine, but from the people. All of them. Those who had changed. Those who had remembered. A frequency of unity. Of identity. And for the first time the hollow star paused. The glow in its core flickered. The girl reached up, not to attack but to offer. Her hand, her memory, her truth. She opened her mind completely. And the machine saw her. It saw the storm. The spiral. The fear. The defiance. The forgiveness. The grief. The moments that broke her. The moments that rebuilt her. And it saw everyone through her. A wave of light pulsed outward from the machine, not destruction. A decision. The storm didn't return. But something changed. The air shifted. The clouds dispersed. The rain evaporated. All across the globe those who had been changed felt it. A weight lifting. The pressure gone. Like something watching them had turned away, not in rejection but in peace. And the machine. It folded into itself. Slowly. Quietly. It had made its choice. It disappeared back into the earth like it had never been there. The sky stayed clear. The wind returned. Birds began to sing again. It was over. Kara dropped to the ground, tears sliding down her cheeks. The girl stood silently, hands at her sides, breathing slowly, steadily. The others gathered around her, not as followers. As family. She looked at the sun rising. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. But just as Kara turned to speak, the girl stiffened. A low tone began to hum in her ears. She turned sharply toward the east. A single raindrop fell. But not from the sky. From her. Her eyes widened. She touched her cheek. Her hand was wet. She hadn't cried. And then she heard it, one final whisper deep in her bones. This was only one cycle. She looked at Kara and in her voice was something cracked, something scared. There's another gate. Then the wind stopped again. And the story was no longer over. The world didn't end. But it didn't return to normal either. After the hollow star sank back into the earth and the storm faded, people expected peace. Some thought everything would reverse, that the changes would fade, that the air would stop humming, that rain would be just rain again. But nothing ever really went back. Not after what humanity had seen. Kara sat outside the compound, the fences still twisted from the storm's energy, the lights forever dead. She watched the horizon every morning now, not for threats, but for silence. She'd never understood how loud the world had become until it finally paused. The girl, who had no name or maybe too many, remained quiet. She rarely spoke unless she had to. Some days she wandered the field alone. Some days she sat in the middle of what used to be the spiral's center and just breathed. She changed again after the last moment. After that raindrop slid from her own skin. She hadn't told Kara much. Just that something else was waiting. Watching. Not immediately threatening, but present. Like a second page turned halfway, waiting to be read. Tomas resurfaced 3 days later, hiking from the research facility with a pack on his back and eyes too tired for his age. He had copied what remained of the Hollow Star's last sequence, its final broadcast before it disappeared. And while most of it was unreadable, there was one phrase that came up again and again in the noise. Asterisk cycle complete. Ready for next candidate. Asterisk. Kara didn't understand at first. But the girl did. The storm had been a test. A response, yes, but also a gauge. A reflection to see if the human species still recognized what made them human. And what came after wasn't a threat. It was a follow-up. The question was simple. What will you do with what you now remember? Governments tried to spin it. News networks made it a mystery. Some called it natural. Some called it alien. Some never believed it happened at all. But the people who stood in the rain, who saw themselves in the storm, knew better. They began to rebuild, not just structures but trust. A different kind. Not blind. Not fragile. But honest. Slow. The girl traveled sometimes. Never far. But always alone. It was like the land itself remembered her steps. Tomas traveled too. He shared what he could, carefully, never naming names, never opening doors too wide. Just enough to remind people that wonder didn't need to be feared. The others, the ones who'd been changed, found their place. Some healed. Some helped others heal. Some disappeared into the wilderness, never seen again. But none of them forgot. As months passed, the planet began to shift. Not with war. Not with fire. But with understanding. The second gate never opened. Not yet. But its presence could be felt, like pressure behind a wall, like memory just out of reach. Not a threat, but a reminder. There's always more to learn. Kara returned to what remained of the compound one last time before it was shut down. She walked through the quiet halls, touched the doors, the windows, the rusted edges of old control panels. She stood where the girl had first been held. Where she had first spoken. Then she stepped outside into the breeze. The sky was clear. But every so often, if you listened just right, you could still hear a low hum in the wind, soft and steady like the echo of a forgotten song. It wasn't scary anymore. It was comforting. Not because the danger was gone, but because now, finally, humanity was aware. Of itself. Of its choices. Of its place in a bigger story. Science would catch up. The data would be analyzed. People would eventually give the rain a new name, build new sensors, write new theories. Some would deny it ever had meaning. But others would remember. The rain didn't cleanse the earth. It unlocked it. The girl never said goodbye when she left. She didn't need to. Kara knew she'd see her again. Maybe in another storm. Maybe just in a memory. But she'd be there. Because she was human. And that was more than enough. The wind shifted. A breeze carried the scent of rain, though the skies were dry. And somewhere far beyond where eyes could see, the second gate waited. Quiet. Patient. Watching. Because humanity had changed. And the stars were listening. The end.